Well, I'd like to say a very big welcome home to Gert Hansen on behalf of all of us at Metro Kids Society. For those that don't know, Gert Hansen just completed a 30-day homeless journey. So you had felt compelled for quite a while that you were supposed to go downtown Vancouver and live for 30 days as a homeless person on the street.
Yeah.
And you would not have been able to do that if it weren't for already the groups and ministries and organizations that are already in place in Vancouver, because you did this unassisted. Like, you were on your own. It's not like Gert had a support team that was, guarding her or bringing her money or whatnot. You essentially just went down there on your own. And so can you tell us a little bit about how you were able to do that? Who helped you out?
Well, I'm first going to look at the very practical things of just a friendly city, a city that when I asked someone, what do you think of Vancouver? They just said, so many people are smiling. And so there's this kind of, people smiling at you, and you feel, it makes you feel like you're respected and it's a safe place, when you have that. And then I just do want to thank, the different places that I spent many nights at. And of course you tried to be strategic because you didn't want them seeing your face all the time, so you had to be a little bit strategic. But I mean, the Break a coffee shop that's open 24 hours, if I wasn't sitting in the coffee shop, then I might be sitting outside of it, where I felt like at least there was somebody there that was somebody I could go to if something happened. And so Tim Hortons, McDonald's, the Break a coffee shop, I think were my main visiting points. And again, it was like across from the Tim Hortons and the McDonald's on Burrard is the Anglican Church. And so I would sit, on a chair by but I always felt like there was somebody, close by if I needed help or assistance.
So even businesses that are open 24 hours is a refuge for someone who is homeless. And
if you have money.
If you have enough for a cup of coffee. So how long could you stretch a cup of coffee?
Well, sometimes you had to cheat a little bit. I did do a little bit of cheating where I'd come into a Tim Hortons when it was busier in the earlier part of the night and, see somebody's cup of coffee still there and put it in front of me like it was mine. So, I did a little bit of that because $330 minus, a few things, your phone for one, does not leave you a lot of money.
So you had $330 to live off of for the entire month, because that is the amount of social assistance you could receive as a homeless person.
As a homeless person, yeah. If you did not have shelter.
$330 a month. So if you think of that, that's about $10 a day.
Yeah, so minus your phone, which is $70.
So $10 a day for 3 meals a day is not going to stretch very far.
No, it's not.
So you can understand why having a cup of coffee would be a big expenditure for you.
Yes. And something I wasn't willing to give up. My cup of coffee.
So you had some businesses that you felt safe in and were able to rotate between.
Yeah, I was kind of,
And obviously you weren't exhibiting violent or drug addictive behaviors, and so
which of course made it possible for me to do this. So even if you'd fall asleep in these establishments, there would often be a security guard that would come around and say, hey, you can't sleep here.
Okay.
But you did, that didn't happen all the time. Right. So I did get sometimes a 2-hour sleep, just sitting there. So
just nodding off.
Yeah.
So there were the businesses, and then were there places that you went to for food?
So the places I ventured for food, well, for one, I stayed at a couple of shelters, one related to the Bloom Group, and one was Belkin House, which was Salvation Army. And so when you do stay at these shelters, you are given 3 meals a day.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was something really nice. And apparently the one was considered the Hilton of the shelters.
Yes.
And very hard for me to leave it.
Yes.
They had a chef prepare their meals.
Wow.
It was phyllo pastry and fried chicken and just some really I think it's again it's such warmth having a meal. So I would say about the Bloom Group, which was the first shelter I went to, you just cannot believe what it's like. They gave me a pair of pajamas, and of course I did a video on that, but it wasn't only that. It's like you have a bed to sleep in, you have a door to close, it's so warming. I can't say enough about it. I realize that people say about, shelters, well, your roommate could be this, or she, like the roommate that I had worked nights, but her roommate previous to me was an active drug user who was, basically doing the drug use right on the floor of the dorm.
Right.
So again, that can be quite intimidating for someone.
Because that women's shelter in particular is a low barrier shelter.
That's right.
Meaning that they're not saying no drug use because they know that the drug addicted women are extremely vulnerable, and they just want to get them off the streets and safe. And then hopefully they can transition into some sort of recovery. Yeah, so I can see how it would be you would feel like you're in this incredible home, and yet you still are exposed to activity that puts you at risk because of the different drug use that's happening. So it's a shelter, but it's still not quite as safe as being at home.
Yeah, and a lot of people wouldn't feel, because you have people with mental illness and a lot of the drug addicted behavior, as you know, with the withdrawal, it's just they do odd movements, and sometimes they're hallucinating, or they're delusional, and so you have those things to deal with too. So, but I still felt like, from being on the street, it was so much of a safer place. You could go to a staff member and say, this is happening, and they would be there to help you and assist you.
Yes.
And so, that was, the Bloom Group was the first shelter I stayed at, so it was pretty special.
So you stayed at shelters only a part of your time, and you basically wanted to have the experience of being on the streets and understanding the vulnerability that comes with that, and then also having the experience of what it's like to be in the different shelters. And so you weren't necessarily telling them, I'm a nurse, I'm a pastor's wife, I'm doing this as a fundraiser. You wanted to experience what it was like to be treated as somebody coming in off the streets.
And I think the biggest thing too is I was homeless by choice, but I was homeless. Nothing was going to bring me back.
No.
So it was I was telling the truth when I said I am homeless, because I was committed to what I was doing, and I felt it was important, and I felt, I didn't want any special treatment.
Right.
I know another place that was really special to me. It was the first shelter I went to. It's a shelter that only occurs one night a week at the First Baptist Church. But there they give you a meal. You can volunteer, so that meant something to me to be able to give back. That I didn't have to fill out all these forms. I had to sign a waiver that said if something happens to you here, we're not responsible. But it was so nice to be able to give back.
And so what did they say, if you'd like to help prepare the meal? Or
I could do, they assign you different jobs, and so they have different things to do, but I kind of got into the kitchen and cut up the lettuce and the with the ladies in the kitchen, and there's this camaraderie there and working together, and so that's something special too, right, where you just feel like I'm like everybody else. I'm not homeless. I think some of them were shocked when I put my mat on the floor too, but they treated me so well there. And I know the first night was so intimidating because it was all these men, and there were a couple women who were couples, but I can remember thinking, oh my goodness, there's all these men, and it was so frightening to me. But of course they have 24 hours of people there that are staying overnight, that are staying awake, and when they plopped me this one lady from the shelter plopped me kind of in a certain place.
Put your mat down.
And I kind of thought, no, I can do this, you know. And then when I actually was laying down trying to go to sleep with everybody around me, I was thinking, they're homeless men. They're not evil men, horrible men. They're homeless. And so there might be a couple that would steal your stuff. I'm just saying they're desperate. They're in desperate situations. But most of them, I think, would come to my rescue if something would happen.
I thought it was really beautiful when you said every church could do this. You had said to me before that here it was one night a week, but yet it was something that would help someone on the street make it through to the next week. And that was such an encouragement that it really wouldn't be that much of a stretch for any church to just provide shelter one night a week, and what was it, a supper and a breakfast?
And a breakfast. And it came quickly, because you basically, supper and everything was cleared out, and then they put the mats down at 10, and 6 o'clock, they're putting the tables up for breakfast. And the first day I'm like, why are they getting us up at 6 o'clock? But then I thought, it's for people that are working.
Yes.
There are the working homeless.
Yes.
And so it's like they, know that some people have to leave and they can't stagger this whole event. So,
right. Yeah.
But I remember that first morning of that warm bowl of oatmeal.
Yeah.
It sounds so funny, but
yeah.
It meant so much to just have a warm, hot bowl of oatmeal. And so that was just something special. I can remember what guys there ate, right? They just would have their plates full, and they would just say to me, well, this has to last me the day.
Right.
Because I said, boy, you guys are really eating a lot.
Yeah.
And they said, this has to last the rest of the day.
And when you came back from your 30 days of homelessness and went to church, that was the first thing you did on your first day back from the streets. That was one of the things that made you cry the most when you shared, was talking about just how much it meant to you, these different groups and the work that they were doing down there. Like, you could hardly get the stories out because you were so personally impacted by kindness towards you.
Yeah.
You needed that kindness.
Yeah. And I think, Union Gospel Mission was a meal. Belkin House served meals. The Bloom Group served meals. And the Street Church served hot dogs. And, it meant so much. I cannot tell you the dignity and the respect that they showed the homeless. And just was so beautiful. And even their prayers, before a meal, because they would just, at the Union Gospel Mission, they would just say a prayer of, we're so glad you're here.
Yes.
It's so nice for us to be able to serve you.
Yeah.
Like, it was so beautiful. And you could just feel God's love come from those people. It was so clear.
That is wonderful. And it's a good reminder to us that, we are commanded to care for the poor and the widow and the orphan, and it's not commanded just so that we can feel good about ourselves, but that's because that's who Jesus really loves. And so he cares about them, and he wants us to be his carer. So you had various places that you ate at. You stayed at a women's shelter. You stayed at the First Baptist Church. Was there another shelter that you experienced when you were there?
So did I mention Belkin House?
Briefly, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the Salvation Army?
Yeah, that's the Salvation Army. And so there you stay in a four-bed dorm. And I remember my roommate snored, and it was, but I could sleep through that. But just again, it's just having that safe place, and you do meet other women who are in similar circumstances, and so you get to know some people. But all the stories of people being homeless are so varied. You think, okay, it's the drug addict, or it's no, it's the average person who suddenly finds themselves without work, and suddenly finds themselves not being able to pay their rent, and suddenly they don't have shelter.
Or was in a relationship that was not safe.
Well, or a landlord that beat them up.
Right.
Got violent.
Right.
And so these are, and again, safe relationship that wasn't safe, where they had to flee, even with their children.
Yeah.
And then they had a safe place for that person to go. And it's just amazing. I was just so amazed by the different organizations out there. And even when you went to the downtown east side, you would see every single day, if not for the ministries that are already down there, you would see different ethnic groups down there giving food, just setting up a little table and giving food. You would see JJ Bean down there, and I recognize those Starbucks. I recognize that Starbucks a butter tart,
yes.
and different things at Union Gospel Mission and Subway, and they would have vans, and they would just open their vans and begin to pass out food. Yeah. So I want to say that most of the I want to say restaurants, but different places out there that are serving food to the public are giving their food to places that need it.
That it is a really good testament that people do care and do want to try and help, and the homeless aren't just being forgotten or looked upon as, well, you messed up your life and that's too bad, but that people from all different groups are trying to make a difference. And one of the amazing things is that part of your 30 days of homelessness is people donated to the cause to metrokids.ca/homeless, and then also as well people donated separately through checks and money, and you were able to raise over $13,000, which is a significant amount of money. And part of what you wanted to do with the fundraising was to give back to those charities that were so kind to you and helped you make it through. And so could you tell us a little bit about how you're going to give back?
Well, 20% of all the funds we raise will go back to the different organizations and ministries that I frequented, you know. And I almost forgot to mention, again, one of my favorite places was called The Gathering Place. And that was actually for homeless to be able to come, people in poverty to be able to come wash their clothes, have a shower. They even had a library there if you wanted to finish your GED. And so I think all of these, a lot of these ministries go beyond just providing you know, food or a shelter, but they then try to get you on the road to being able to start a new life. So whether that's employment, whether that's filling out a resume, whether that's some training you may need. So I think it goes kind of, you know, even beyond just the initial of what you need. There's counseling, there's healing, there's, you know, all of that. So yeah, we're wanting to give back to those different ministries.
That must be a very good feeling then, knowing that as the funds that were raised through incredible people that just saw what you were doing and wanted to be a part of it, that now some of those dollars will go towards helping some of those people that you walked past every day, and that now you would recognize their faces and you can think of the people and know, because of everyone's partnership, I know that that young prostitute is going to have a safe place to stay if she needs to get away, or that drug addict can come and get a meal that will hopefully help them on the road to health and recovery.
Yeah.
So that's a beautiful story. So the rest of the money that was raised and will continue to be raised is seed money for a future youth shelter for Metro Kids Society and a youth transitional home. And so could you talk about the importance of that and why you're so passionate about ending youth homelessness, specifically in the city of Surrey?
Yeah, I think youth are so vulnerable because of their age and their lack of life experience. So what we're seeing is, first of all, we're seeing in foster care that there's this gap, you know, of when they're 18, they get cut out of foster care. Now, of course, like you say, there's families that don't, you know, that try to help with the transition, but there's ones that can't. And so that's kind of the cutting point. And so you see them very vulnerable and having to find shelter. And then there's sometimes, you know, not consistent with their job, or their job is part-time. They don't get enough money to provide for themselves. And so they're not able to cover, and they end up on the street. Or we see families that have had the history of being on welfare, and then they're not able to support their older children anymore, so they end up on the street. Or sometimes it's violence or abuse of some sort. And so what you're seeing is young people going to the street, and it's not a safe place. I was there, and you know, there's a lot of if they see that you're vulnerable, you're going to be a target. You're going to be a target even for the trafficking world. You're going to be a target for the drug world. And there is a community down there, and if you don't feel a part of anything, and there's a community, and yes, they're abusing drugs or whatever, but they make you feel like you're something special. You're going to get involved in that lifestyle. They're in it. And so that's their influence. and you're trying to escape your own pain. So you're more vulnerable to drug abuse.
Yes.
You're more vulnerable to getting into that world.
Yes.
You know, of even if you get into drug abuse, then sex trafficking. So I'm finding that is what Metro Kids is trying to prevent. It's trying to prevent children being vulnerable on the streets.
And once a young person is on the streets, what makes it so difficult to then start their adult life, or, you know, in a healthy way?
Well, yeah, I think there's such a gap in that being able to transition. I know there's a couple of youth shelters that are specific for youth in the city, you know, and so it's not only about, we'll provide food and shelter. It's that next step of, do they need healing? Do they need to be able to make out a work application or a resume? And so it's so much more. It's like coming alongside of them and championing with them in their life and giving them a step up and giving them, you know, the dignity and the respect and the safe place to be able to grow and to be able to, you know, to be able to take that next step of being an adult and being independent.
Yeah. And becoming everything that they were made to become, and not have their life literally taken away from them through addictions and trafficking and all the other things that can happen to young people. So thank you so much, Gert, for your heart and your commitment to keeping this issue at the forefront of our minds. And thank you to everyone who supported and who gave. And together we are going to end youth homelessness and save those kids from ending up on the streets. Got to keep them away from there.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Words can never express, you know, your support, your prayers, I really felt like I had a community that wasn't with me, but was completely behind me in this journey. And so anything you give, we'll continue to go toward this vision and this dream. And we want to dream big at Metro Kids because we believe that we want to do more to make a difference. So thank you.
Thank you, Gert.